Good afternoon, respected Pro Vice Chancellor, Mahatma Gandhi University of Medical Sciences and Technology, Dr. V.K. Kapoor sir.
Dean Principal and Controller, Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital, Dr. N.D. Soni, Dr. Jagmohan Sharma sir, Dr. Shamsuddin ji, our colleagues, dear students and the audience on YouTube. On behalf of Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital and Team UGCR, I extend my warm welcome to all of you to this 5th UGCR. The topic for this UGCR is jaundice, and which is being taken into two parts. In part 1, we have covered anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and pathological aspects pertaining to jaundice. And today in this UGCR, the 5th UGCR, we will be covering the clinical aspects, radiological aspects, treatment management part, surgical and medical of jaundice, neonatal as well as adults. And the presentation would be done by our MBBS students, the students of Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital. And this would be followed by experts' comments by two of our faculty members, Dr. Rajat Bhargav and Dr. Vinay Mehla. Both are from gastro medicine and gastro surgery department respectively in our college. Then it would be followed by a short question answer round in which our students would be, the participating students would be answering the questions of audience with the help of their team members and moderators. And finally, there would be a group photograph and certificate distribution. So now it's over to MBBS student Pulkit Bhatt for his presentation on behalf of Department of Medicine.
Respected dignitaries, teachers and my colleagues, today I, Pulkit Bhatt of final year MBBS, is going to present on topic clinical features and medical management of jaundice, prepared by me, Arvind Sidhu, Yash Malik, Krati Jindal, Pooja Kumari Rasal, under the guidance of Dr. Puneet Rijwani sir, Professor and Head of Department of General Medicine, and moderated by Dr. Shrikant Chaudhary, Associate Professor, Department of General Medicine. Today we'll be talking about what is jaundice, epidemiology, pathophysiology, causes, diagnostic approach, history taking, clinical features, examination, investigations and treatment. Jaundice, yellowish discoloration of body tissues resulting from the deposition of bilirubin in hyperbilirubinemia. Hyperbilirubinemia occurs in liver disease, hemolytic disorders of bilirubin metabolism. For the epidemiology, the prevalence of jaundice varies with age and sex. Newborns and older adults are more often affected. Approximately 20% of newborns develop jaundice in the first week of life, primarily because of immaturity of the hepatic conjugation process. Congenital abnormality, hemolytic or bilirubin uptake disorders, or conjugation defects are also responsible for jaundice in infancy or childhood. Viral hepatitis A, it is the most frequent cause of jaundice among the school-age children. Common duct stones, alcoholic liver disease, neoplastic jaundice occurs in mid-age and older patients. For a recap in pathophysiology, RBC contains hemoglobin and it is two components, heme and globin. Heme under the action of heme oxygenase is converted to biliverdin, and under the action of biliverdin reductase it is converted to unconjugated bilirubin. Under the enzyme UDP glucuryl transferase, it is converted to conjugated bilirubin and excreted through bile. In intestine, it is acted upon by the intestinal bacteria to convert in urobilinogen. It undergoes the enterohepatic circulation and it is again gone to the liver, and some part it is excreted through the kidney. And the remaining part it is converted to urobilinogen and stilcobilinogen, and it is excreted through the feces. Normal serum bilirubin levels, it is 0.3 to 1.2 mg per deciliter, which is normal. Above it, till 2.5 mg per deciliter, it is latent jaundice, which is not clinically appreciated. Above 2.5, it is clinically appreciated. Types of jaundice. It is pre-hepatic, hepatic and post-hepatic. In the case of pre-hepatic jaundice, it is the pathology prior to the liver. If it is hepatic, it is the pathology of the liver. If it is post-hepatic, it is the pathology after conjugation of bilirubin. Causes of jaundice. It is isolated hyperbilirubinemia. It is of two types, direct and indirect. In the case of direct, inherited conditions like Dubin-Johnson syndrome and Rotor syndrome. In the case of indirect, there might be hemolytic disorders, ineffective erythropoiesis, increased bilirubin production. Example, massive blood transfusion, drugs like rifampicin, probenecid, and antibiotics like cephalosporins. Inherited conditions like Crigler-Najjar type 1 and type 2, and Gilbert syndrome. In case of pre-hepatic jaundice, there might be impaired uptake and overproduction. In the case of impaired uptake, drugs inhibiting bilirubin intake like rifampicin and probenecid. Drugs inhibiting binding of bilirubin to albumin, it is phenytoin or sulfonamides. In case of overproduction, there might be hemolytic disorders like malaria, G6PD deficiency, hereditary spherocytosis, or the sickle cell anemia. Other, it is ineffective erythropoiesis due to deficiency of vitamin B12 or the folate deficiencies. In the case of hepatocellular conditions, there might be viral hepatitis, which may include hepatitis A, B, C, D, E, Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, and herpes simplex virus. Other causes might include alcoholic hepatitis, chronic liver disease, drug toxicity like acetaminophen, isoniazid, Wilson's disease, autoimmune hepatitis. In the case of obstructive jaundice, there might be intraluminal, neural, or extraluminal. In the case of intraluminal, there might be biliary tree caniculi like cholelithiasis or cholelithiasis. Infestations like Ascaris worm, hydrated cyst, liver flu. In the case of neural, that is evolved, congenital like biliary atresia, choledochal cyst. In the case of inflammatory conditions, there might be cholangitis. In case of neoplastic, there might be cholangiocarcinoma or the Klatskin's tumor. There might be bile duct strictures also. In the case of extraluminal, there might be benign or malignant. In the case of benign, there might be pancreatitis. In the case of malignant, carcinoma gallbladder, periampullary cancer, or carcinoma head of pancreas. For the diagnostic approach in the case of jaundice, we will be going for the history taking, physical examination, laboratory tests like LFT, and the radiological examination. If there is less than 15% direct bilirubin, it is indirect hyperbilirubinemia. If it is more than 15%, that is direct hyperbilirubinemia. There may be increase in alkaline phosphatase, which is seen in the case of cholecystitis. In case of history taking for the pre-hepatic jaundice, we will be going for the family history of jaundice, drug history, transfusion history, and nutritional history. For the hepatic jaundice, we will be going for the history of outside food consumption, water consumption, fever, right upper quadrant pain, nausea, vomiting, previous history of liver disease, alcohol history, sexual history, drug abuse history. In the case of post-hepatic jaundice, there might be loss of appetite, pruritus, or clay-colored stools. In the case of clinical features, there might be fever, nausea, vomiting, right upper quadrant discomfort, change in skin color, dark color urine, clay-colored stools, pruritus, intermittent pain and intermittent fever, and loss of appetite or weight loss. For the general examination, we will be going for the inspection. We will be looking for the jaundice in the sclera due to the higher affinity of bilirubin due to their high elastin contents. We can look for the other sites, that is the sublingual mucosa, oral cavity, palms and soles in the case of children, and skin. Yellowish discoloration of sclera can be seen without jaundice in the case of hyperkeratinemia, hypothyroidism, excessive exposure to the phenols and nitric acid, quinacin intake, anorexia nervosa, and drugs like sunitinib and sorafenib. For the palpation, we will be looking for the nine regions divided through two horizontal lines and two vertical lines. Horizontal lines passing through the transpyloric and transtubercular, while in the case of vertical lines passing through the midclavicular line. We will be dividing into the 9 quadrants, 2 hypochondric regions, 1 epigastric, 2 lumbar regions, 1 umbilical region, and 2 iliac regions and 1 hypogastric regions. It can also be divided into 4 quadrants passing through the umbilicus. We will be looking for the tenderness over right upper quadrant. For the palpation, we will be going for the splenomegaly. For palpating the spleen, we will be looking for the splenic enlargement. It should begin with the patient lying supine and with knees flexed. Using the right hand, the examiner should begin well below the left costal margin and feel gently but firmly for the splenic edge by pushing down, then towards the anterior part of the body, and then release it. We can look for the splenomegaly. If there is splenomegaly found, it can point towards the infiltrative diseases or infections or chronic liver disease. For the inspection or for the palpation of gallbladder, the gallbladder is located in the upper right quadrant at the subcostal margins. To palpate it, place one hand inferiorly to the right costal margin and the left hand to support the inferior aspect of rib cage. A healthy gallbladder cannot be palpated. If it is palpable and distended, it can go towards the malignant biliary obstruction. We can also look for the asterixis that can go towards the fulminant hepatic failure or the end-stage liver disease. In the case of laboratory investigations, we can find out total bilirubin. It is increased in the case of pre-hepatic, hepatic and post-hepatic. For the conjugated bilirubin, it is slightly elevated in the case of hepatic jaundice and more in the case of post-hepatic jaundice. In case of unconjugated bilirubin, it is increased in case of pre-hepatic jaundice, slightly in hepatic jaundice, normal in the case of post-hepatic jaundice. Urine bilirubin, it is elevated in case of post-hepatic jaundice, might be slightly elevated in the case of hepatic jaundice. For urine bile salts, it is highly elevated in the case of post-hepatic jaundice. For urine urobilin, it is increased in the case of pre-hepatic jaundice. In the case of hepatic jaundice, it is decreased and absent in the case of post-hepatic jaundice. The enzymes like SGOT, SGPT, it is increased in the case of hepatic jaundice only. Alkaline phosphate is increased in the case of post-hepatic jaundice. Prothrombin time, it is increased in the case of hepatic and post-hepatic jaundice. For serum albumin, it is decreased in the case of hepatic jaundice. Radiological investigation, we can go for the ultrasonography, ERCP, that is the endoscopic retrograde cholangopancreatography, or MRCP, that is magnetic resonance cholangopancreatography. Hepatitis as a common cause, we can divide it as hepatitis A, B and C. In the case of infective material, in case of hepatitis A, it is feces, for B it is blood and body fluids, and in case of C it is blood. Mode of transmission, in case of hepatitis A, it is fecal-oral route, in case of B it is unsafe needle, unsafe sex, mother to child transmission. In case of C it is injecting drug use. Incubation period for hepatitis A is 15 to 50 days. For B, it is 45 to 180 days. In case of C, it is 6 to 12 weeks. Mother to child transmission, there is no risk in hepatitis A. In case of B, it is present but preventable with immunoglobulins and immunization at the birth. For hepatitis C, there is 4 to 6% risk but can be reduced with appropriate perinatal care. Chronic infection is seen in the case of hepatitis B up to 90% if it is acquired at birth, up to 10% if it is acquired in adults. In case of C, it is about 55 to 85% prevalence. Progression of chronic infection to cirrhosis, it is seen in the case of hepatitis B with a prevalence of 25%. In the case of C, it is 20 to 30%. Immunity following clearance, it is seen in hepatitis A, B, not in C. Vaccine, it is available for hepatitis A and B, and it is preventable. For the prevention of the jaundice, we can go for the NHP guidelines, that is avoid contaminated food and water, maintain good hygiene, take vaccination for hepatitis A and B, ensure safe injections practices, avoid excessive use of alcohol, safer sex practices. For the treatment, we need to treat the cause. For example, if it is due to the malaria, we need to treat the malaria by giving the treatment like ACT and the chloroquine. For neonatal jaundice, we can go for the phototherapy, IV fluids in the case of dehydration as a symptomatic treatment, for nausea, vomiting and pain, antibiotics and antivirals for the infection. In the case of autoimmune hepatitis, we can go for the steroids and immunosuppressants. For chronic hepatitis B and C, we can go for the oral antivirals like tenofovir. For case of fulminant hepatitis and end-stage liver disease, we can go for the orthoptic liver transplantation according to the MED score or the Child-Pugh score. Now I would like to invite Ayushi Bansal from the Department of Pediatrics.
See, you covered the topic in great detail and very well, but there are 2 or 3 basic principles of any presentation. One is that you must see what you are supposed to present. Your topic was clinical features and medical management of diabetes, because all the first half of your presentation was already covered last time, so it was a repetition. number one. Number two, clinical features, you should, by this time, if I am an undergraduate student, I should know how to diagnose hepatitis, how to diagnose hemolytic jaundice, how to diagnose obstructive jaundice. So idea was that you should have told us how to differentiate between these. And because you had so much of content, you had to rush through your slide. You were virtually running. That is not effective. You know what you have written, you can understand. I know about jaundice, so I can understand, but your friends probably would have grasped very little of what you showed or what you read because you were rushing through your presentation. So one lesson to all of you who are going to present in future UGCRs, please stick to the part of the topic which has been assigned to you and speak slowly, repeat important points so that they make a mark on the mind of the audience and convey only the important points. You can't cover the whole chapter in 10-minute presentation, so you have to extract the important information. Good, you covered it in detail, but maybe you can improve it a little more. Yes.
Good morning, respected dignitaries, teachers, and my colleagues. I am Ayushi Bansal, going to present a topic of clinical features and medical management of neonatal jaundice under the guidance of Dr. Madhu Mathur, Ma'am, Professor and Head, Department of Neonatology, moderated by Dr. Saurabh Singh, Associate Professor, and Dr. Arjun Verma, Assistant Professor, Department of Neonatology. Slides were prepared by me, Tanya Bhairunani, Simran Chaudhary, Abhideep Berry, and Anshika Ratna. Now, jaundice, neonatal jaundice, it is so common that it occurs in more than 80% of newborns. It can be of two types. It can be physiological as well as pathological. Now we'll overview physiology of jaundice. What happens in hepatic sinusoids, extravascular and intravascular hemolysis occurs in which hemoglobins break down into heme, which is then converted into unconjugated bilirubin. Unconjugated bilirubin goes into hepatocyte where it is converted into conjugated bilirubin. Now conjugated bilirubin through bile ducts enter into second part of duodenum where it is converted into urobilinogen. Urobilinogen have two fates. Mainly, it converts into stercobilinogen, which is then excreted into feces, and 10% of it enters into enterohepatic circulation where it is excreted through kidney and give color to urine. Now, why jaundice is so common in newborns? First, there is more RBC mass in newborn and it has short RBC lifespan. It has lifespan of 90 days, whereas in adults, the lifespan of RBC is 120 days. In neonates, immature hepatic uptake and conjugation is there because sometimes the hepatic system is not mature. And there is increased enterohepatic circulation. Now, why non-physiological jaundice? Why there is increased bilirubin load? More commonly, it occurs due to hemolysis, which can due to be RH incompatibility or ABO incompatibility. In RH incompatibility, what happens is mother's blood group is RH negative, whereas in newborn, RH factor is positive. In ABO incompatibility, the mother's blood group is O, or baby can have either A or B blood group. Other causes such as cephalhematoma, polycythemia, spherocytosis, alpha thalassemia, or G6PD or pyruvate kinase deficiency can also be the causes of increased bilirubin load. What are the causes for impaired conjugation? As I have told earlier, it occurs more commonly in preterm babies and certain genetic syndromes such as Gilbert syndrome and Crigler-Najjar syndrome. In Gilbert syndrome, there is transient decrease due to stress factors, and in Crigler-Najjar, it can be of two types. It can be of complete deficiency or partial deficiency. What are the causes of increased enterohepatic circulation? Mainly, suboptimal breastfeeding jaundice happens. It is in early presentation. It occurs due to non-optimal feeding and decreased intestinal motility. Later it presents as breast milk jaundice, which occurs due to beta-glucuronidase enzyme, which converts conjugated bilirubin back into unconjugated bilirubin and increases the chances of enterohepatic circulation. And thirdly, it can occur due to intestinal obstruction. Now we'll see something about conjugated jaundice. In conjugated jaundice, there is no problem in enzyme deficiency or conjugation of bilirubin. It mainly occurs due to extrahepatic biliary atresia, or it can also occur due to neonatal hepatitis. Its main presentation is clay-colored stool, as conjugated bilirubin is not passed into small intestine and not released in stool. It is collected in liver and then excreted through kidney, which gives dark-colored urine. Now, when do we suspect conjugated hyperbilirubinemia? If there is dark-colored urine or high-colored urine, as we say, or we can see clay-colored stool, which is the most primary diagnosis of conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Now we'll see clinical presentation of neonatal jaundice. What are the high-risk factors for developing jaundice? Blood group incompatibility, such as RH incompatibility or ABO incompatibility. It can be cephalic hematoma, which is subperiosteal bleed under the scalp. Can be diabetic mother, Down syndrome, exclusive breastfeeding, feeding non-optimal, gestation age 35 to 36 weeks, high bilirubin in first 24 hours. Now, how do we assess the child of neonatal jaundice? We examine the child in sunlight by pressing skin against bony surface. Normally, there is blanching of skin present, but in icteric child, there would be yellow discoloration seen. It is assessed through Cramer's rule, in which 5 zones are divided. Zone 1 is up to neck, head and neck. Zone 2 is trunk region. Zone 3 is pelvis and lower limbs up to knees. Zone 4 include lower limbs below knees and upper limbs. And zone 5 is palms and sole. If jaundice is seen in palms and soles, then bilirubin levels are above 15 mg per deciliter and it is called as serious jaundice. Other way to assess is transcutaneous bilirubinometer, in which we press the TCB up on the skin and transcutaneous level of bilirubin are seen. What is the management of neonates suffering from jaundice? Now we can manage it by 2 ways. First, we can give phototherapy and exchange transfusion. We'll see first about phototherapy. Before that, we have to send laboratory tests such as hemoglobin estimation, serum bilirubin levels, blood group of mother and newborn, direct sputum test, and G6PD enzyme. When do we suspect non-physiological jaundice clinically? When onset is before 24 hours, or rise in bilirubin levels greater than 0.2 mg per deciliter per hour, or any increase in bilirubin that requires phototherapy, or jaundice persists greater than 2 weeks. Now there are certain graphs given by American Academy of Pediatrics. These are standard graphs according to which we see when to refer a child for a phototherapy. For example, we'll take a child X whose gestational age is greater than 40 weeks. Now we can see if child is of 48 hours, if levels are above 18 or 17 mg per deciliter, we'll refer the child for phototherapy. Phototherapy, special blue lights converts bilirubin to water-soluble forms for excretion, which is lumirubin. 460 to 490 nanometer of lights are given, in which we cover eyes and genitalia of baby, because phototherapy is retinotoxic and genitalia can lead to mutation. So to prevent that, we cover it. Now, except phototherapy, we can also use Billy blanket, in which we wrap the child around this blanket to cover more surface area. And there is flux meter, through which we measure the flux of light given. Now, how do we monitor the child in phototherapy? We see if the breastfeeding is frequent, and we monitor the weight and urine output of child. Now, in older days, there used to be sun therapy, but it has no role now because it has very low flux in bright light and thus leads to other side effects as well, such as sunburn, hyperthermia, which can lead to poor feeding, and lethargy. It can also lead to delay approach to pediatrician. How do we manage neonates suffering from jaundice? The second part is exchange transfusion. If levels are very high, we do exchange transfusion. What are the risk factors that can lead to neurotoxicity or kernicterus? Albumin level less than 3 mg per deciliter, blood group incompatibility, clinical sepsis, or deficient G6PD enzyme. When do we do immediate transfusion? If there are signs of acute bilirubin encephalopathy, such as hypertonia, arching, retrocolis, opisthotonus, fever, and high-pitched cry. Now, the graphs are given for exchange transfusion as well by American Academy of Pediatrics. In this also, we see if levels are above, then we refer the child for exchange transfusion. How do we do exchange transfusion? Baby's blood is exchanged with compatible blood group. Normal blood volume of neonate is 80 ml per kg. We do double exchange transfusion, in which we exchange by 160 ml per kg of whole blood. Now, how do we see if baby's blood group is compatible? If there is RH incompatibility, then we transfuse RH negative blood group. If there is ABO incompatibility, we transfuse O blood group. And if in other cases, baby's blood group is transfused. Now, for preterm jaundice, there are other different charts given by National Institute of Health and Care Excellence. We can see when to treat the child according to this. What are the take-home messages? Jaundice is very frequent in newborn. High-risk newborn for jaundice should be identified. Close follow-up of newborn during first 3-4 days should be done. Phototherapy and exchange transfusion are decided on the basis of American Academy of Pediatric graphs. Thank you so much. Now I would like to call Bhavyanshi Vishnoi of Department of Radiology.
One important thing which all of you have to remember is that jaundice in a newborn is almost like an emergency. Majority of the cases, especially if a child is preterm, will be physiological jaundice, which will settle on its own over a period of a couple of weeks. But if it doesn't, then even if you are not a pediatrician, you have to refer that newborn to a specialist, because the most important thing is to differentiate between neonatal hepatitis, for which the treatment is largely conservative, medical, versus what is known as extrahepatic biliary atresia, where the bile ducts have not developed. So there is no bile duct, and the bile cannot go into the intestine, and this needs immediate surgical correction. If that is not done in a reasonable period of time, definitely before 3 months, irreversible damage will occur to the liver, and then the liver will have to be replaced. So it is like an emergency. And even today we see neonates who have had jaundice but referred to a proper place 3 months, 6 months, even 1 year after birth, and then nothing much can be done, because as you all know, liver transplant is a major procedure, both in terms of availability and cost. Whereas the corrective procedure for extrahepatic biliary atresia can be done at less cost at multiple institutions. So it is very important to note that important factor.
A very good afternoon to respected dignitaries, faculty members and all my dear colleagues. Today, we the group of 5 students, Ruksar Banu, Yuvraj Singh Rathod, Hriday Parikh, Divyansh Malkani and I, Bhavyanshi Vishnoi of batch 2021 are here to present the topic Radiological Findings of Jaundice under the guidance of Dr. Hemant Kumar Mishra, Dr. Swati Purohit Joshi and Dr. Anandita Bose. So, as previously discussed, jaundice is a clinical sign of hyperbilirubinemia, which is divided into 2 types, that is non-obstructive and obstructive. Imaging has a role in pre-hepatic, hepatic as well as the post-hepatic causes, but major role in detecting the post-hepatic causes, which includes choledocholithiasis, choledochal cyst, benign strictures, malignant strictures, etc. Jaundice is a common indication for imaging. Often a specific cause will not be found, and the main role is differentiating between a non-obstructive and obstructive jaundice. In the later, extrahepatic or intrahepatic bile duct dilatation can be expected depending upon the level of obstruction. Hepatobiliary ultrasound and MRCP are the mainstay imaging modalities. Now, imaging in obstructive jaundice, especially the post-hepatic causes. First is the X-ray. The X-ray has no definitive role and the gallstones can be visualized only if calcified. 15 to 20% gallstones are radiopaque. In the given image, we can see the presence of radio opacities in the right hypochondrium region, which are likely to be the gallstones. Second is the ultrasound. Ultrasound is preferred initial diagnostic imaging modality for the assessment of hepatobiliary system. It can detect biliary dilatation, dilatation of common bile duct, detect the site of obstruction, gallstones, I'll repeat. USG is the preferred initial diagnostic imaging modality for the assessment of hepatobiliary system. It can detect biliary dilatation, dilatation of the common bile duct, pancreatic duct, detect the site of obstruction, gallstones or the CBD stones. So, this is the image of a normal gallbladder, which is a fluid-filled cystic structure and thus appears black on USG. And the other image, which is a white line inside the gallbladder, is supposed to be a gallstone. The another modality is the endoscopic ultrasound, which has a combining endoscopic range with the diagnostic ability of ultrasound. It can detect mucosal, some mucosal lesions, and others. Next is CT or computed tomography. It is a diagnostic imaging exam that uses X-ray technology to produce images of the inside of the body. CT scans can be done with or without contrast agents. It detects the biliary tree dilatation and the level of obstruction. It is useful especially for obstructive masses, example head of pancreas mass, periampullary masses, etc. So the given image is the axial section of the abdomen, and on the right side we can see the section of liver, gallbladder, and on the left side we can see the section of the spleen. On the right side, we can see the presence of hyperdense calculi or biliary calculi in the gallbladder. The next is the MRCP. MRCP stands for Magnetic Resonance Cholangiopancreatography. It is a special type of MRI exam which is non-invasive way to visualize intra or extrahepatic biliary system and pancreatic duct. It requires 4 hours of fasting before the examination to reduce gastrointestinal secretions and improve gallbladder visualization. It can detect calculi in the gallbladder, CBD, and detect the level of obstruction. It is the investigation of choice for detecting calculi in biliary system after initial USG examination. So, in the right image, we can see that there is a cutoff section seen at distal CBD with dilatation of proximal CBD, cystic duct, and intrahepatic biliary reticle. For reference, we have kept an image on the left side, which is MRCP of a normal biliary tree anatomy. The next is the T-tube cholangiography. It is a fluoroscopic study performed in setting of hepatobiliary disease. Typically, a T-shaped tube is left in the common bile duct at the time of surgery and allows for exploration of the common bile duct and retrieval of the common bile duct stool. At a later date, imaging of the biliary tree is performed via the tube. In this, a non-ionic water-soluble contrast material is injected through the tube. The given image is a normal T-tube cholangiogram. The next is the oral cholecystography. It is obsolete now but was primarily used to image gallbladder. Since most of the GB stones are radiolucent, they appear as filling defects. Now, imaging in non-obstructive jaundice, including the prehepatic and hepatic causes. First is the prehepatic causes, which includes hemolytic anemia and hypersplenism. In hemolytic anemia, bone changes on X-ray, that is widening of medullary space with thinning of cortical bone and widening of the diploid space of the skull. Hypersplenism. We can see splenomegaly on the USG. Next is the hepatic causes. It includes hepatitis, cirrhosis. Here the primary modality is the USG, and CT and MRI can also be done for the liver parenchymal diseases and malignancies. So these are the images of the normal X-ray and X-ray for hemolysis. In this we can see that there is thinning of the cortical bone and widening of the medullary space in the X-ray of hand, and in the X-ray of the skull we can see that there is widening of the diploid space between the outer table and the inner table. The next is the ultrasound for hepatosplenomegaly. Here we can see the enlarged liver in the first and enlarged spleen in the second. Now, imaging in jaundice in pediatric cases. Biliary atresia, choledochal cyst and hepatitis. The primary modality here too is the USG, and rarely CT and MRI are done for the neoplastic etiologies. So these are the images showing the choledochal cyst on USG. The first is the choledochal cyst communicating with the common bile duct, and in the second there is a transabdominal ultrasound showing common bile duct dilatation. Summary and visual recap. Role of imaging in diagnosis. Role of imaging in diagnosis of jaundice has been discussed with emphasis on all modalities like X-ray, USG, CT and MRI. USG is the initial examination of choice. Assessment of causes. We emphasize the importance of each imaging modality in assessing pre-hepatic, hepatic and post-hepatic causes. We included comparative images of normal conditions versus disease state to facilitate a visual understanding. Now I would like to invite Vimla Rajpurohit from the Department of Surgery.
Good afternoon, all my respective dignitaries and my colleagues. I, Vimla Rajpurohit, presenting the topic Surgical Management of Obstructive Jaundice under the guidance of Dr. Akhilesh Shuklecha sir and Dr. Ayush Misra sir, Department of Surgery. The slides are presented by me and my colleague Shanaya Ranva, Kanak Khichar, Sandhya Solanki and Rakshita. Obstructive jaundice. Obstructive jaundice is a common problem that occurs when there is an obstruction to the passage of conjugated bile from liver cells to intestine. If there is any blockage of outflow, overflow of bile into blood, this results into conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Here we can see the anatomy of hepatobiliary system. Right hepatic duct and left hepatic duct combines and forms the common hepatic duct. Common hepatic duct associated with cystic duct and forms the common bile duct. Then common bile duct associated with pancreatic duct and it goes into duodenum. Pathophysiology of obstructive jaundice. Obstruction to outflow of bile, it increases pressure within biliary tree, which results into loss of hepatocyte polarity, disruption of tight junctions between hepatocytes and bile duct cells, hepatocyte necrosis, then rupture of dilated biliary canaliculae into hepatic sinusoids. It results into cholangiovenous and cholangiolymphatic reflux. Bile reflux, neutrophil infiltration, increased fibrinogenesis, fiber deposition in portal tract, hepatic fibrosis and obstruction of sinusoids. Causes of obstructive jaundice, these are on the basis of two types, on the basis of location and on the basis of etiology. On the basis of location, we have three main causes: intraluminal causes, transmural causes and extraluminal causes. In intraluminal causes, common bile duct stones are the most common cause and the second is parasites. Transmural causes are cholangiocarcinoma, choledochal cyst and strictures. Extraluminal causes are carcinoma head of pancreas, periampullary tumor, lymph node, Bellisi syndrome and accidental ligation of common bile duct. On the basis of etiology, congenital causes are biliary atresia, choledochal cyst, inflammatory causes are ascending cholangitis, sclerosing cholangitis, obstructive causes are common bile duct stones, biliary stricture, parasitic infestation, neoplastic causes are carcinoma of head of pancreas, periampullary carcinoma, cholangiocarcinoma, Klatskin tumor and the extensive compression by lymph nodes, tumor over common bile duct. Algorithm for obstructive jaundice. First, we took the history of patient and do examination. Then we do liver function test and ultrasound. In ultrasound, we have two conditions. The stones are present and there are no stones. If the stones are present, We do ERCP, endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography, and laparoscopic cholecystectomy. And if there is no stone, we have three main conditions: the low obstruction, high obstruction, and indeterminate. In low obstruction, we do CT scan and endoscopic ultrasound, and we do dissection and drainage. In high obstruction, we do magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography, MRCP. Then we have two conditions: if the tumor is operable and the tumor is inoperable. In operable tumor, we do PTC drainage, percutaneous transhepatic cholangiography, angiography, diagnostic laparoscopy, and portal vein embolization and dissection. In inoperable tumor, we do stunting and PTC drainage, and in indeterminate obstruction, we do CT scan. Preoperative management, detailed history and physical examination. To establish the cause of jaundice, inquire about systemic symptoms and a detailed systemic examination to ascertain any coexisting medical disease. Investigations are ultrasonography, MRCP, ERCP and CT scan. Correction of malnutrition and hypoproteinemia. Increased dietary protein, transfusion of amino acids and human albumin. Prevention and control of infection. For prophylaxis, broad-spectrum antibiotics are started 24 hours before surgery, and control of bleeding tendency. A prothrombin time index of more than 80% is required before surgery. Maintenance of renal function. The patient is to be kept well hydrated on day of operation. IV fluid is to be started from morning. Choledocholitis. It is stone in the common bile duct and biliary tree. Choledocholitis most frequently reason from the migration of gallstone from the gallbladder into the biliary tree. On the basis of point of origin, there are two types of stones: the primary stones and the secondary stones. In primary stones, they are arise de novo in the bile duct and associated with biliary stasis and infection. In secondary stones formed within the gallbladder and migrate down the cystic duct to the common bile duct, and they are cholesterol stones. Courvoisier's law. According to this law, in a patient with jaundice, if there is palpable gallbladder, it is not due to stones. Exceptions of this rules are double impacted stone, large stone in Hartmann's pouch, empyema gallbladder with common bile duct stone. Investigation. First, we do ultrasound. Ultrasound abdomen may show gallstones, dilated common bile duct more than 8 mm, which suggests biliary obstruction. Sensitivity for common bile duct stones is only 65%. Magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography. It is the choice of investigation, and it is a non-invasive diagnostic method using magnetic field and energy as resonance. Advantages are: it is non-invasive, it gives equal or better imaging than ERCP. Pancreatic divisum or annular pancreas are identified easily by MRCP. Ductal dilatation in chronic pancreatitis and visualization of duct beyond stricture is possible. Disadvantages are: it is only diagnostic, not therapeutic. Treatment is, the choice of treatment is ERCP, endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography, both diagnostic and therapeutic modality. Using a side viewing endoscope, the ampulla of Vater can be identified and cannulated. Injection of water-soluble contrast provide excellent images of the ductal anatomy and can identify causes of obstruction. Therapeutic interventions such as stone removal or stent placement to relieve the obstruction can be performed. The complication of ERCP are pancreatitis, duodenal injury or perforation, cholangitis and GI bleeding. Other treatment are open surgery and minimal invasive surgery. So in open surgery, open polythotomy with T-tube, and in minimal invasive surgery, laparoscopic common bile duct exploration. There are two types of stones: missed retained residual stones, which is less than 2 years. If T-tube present, flushing with heparinized saline, dissolution with methyl terbutyl ether, percutaneous stone extraction via T-tube tract after 4 to 6 weeks, Bergman technique. If T-tube absent, ERCP, stone removal. Recurrent stones, which is more than 2 years, most common due to non-absorbable suture materials, clips. They get internalized and get covered with calcium bilirubinate to form brown pigment stone. ERCP is first approach. If duct dilated more than 2 cm, choledochoduodenostomy or transduodenal sphincteroplasty is done. Medici syndrome. It refers to the obstruction or stricture of the common hepatic duct as result of extensive compression by a gallstone in the Hartmann's pouch. There are 4 types of Medici syndrome. Type 1, extrinsic compression of common hepatic duct by a large stone in Hartmann's pouch. Type 2, stone has now eroded into the hepatic duct to form a fistula involving less than 1/3 of circumference. Type 3, lesions involve 2/3 of circumference. And type 4, completely destroyed hepatic duct. Congenital causes of obstructive jaundice. First is choledochal cyst. It is defined as isolated focal or combined diffuse congenital dilatation of extra or intrahepatic biliary tree. It is congenital cyst with partial or complete weakness of common pilot biliary wall. Treatment is resection of extrahepatic biliary tree with removal of choledochal cyst along with cholecystectomy, and Rho and Y hepaticojejunostomy is the ideal treatment for choledochal cyst, especially types 1, 2 and 4B. If cyst has already turned into malignancy, adenocarcinoma, liver transplantation is the choice in type 4 and 5 cases. Caroli's disease. It is congenital, non-familial, multiple irregular dilatation of the intrahepatic duct with stenotic segment in between. It is associated with congenital hepatic fibrosis and medullary sponge kidney. It can also be included under type 5 choledochal cyst. Treatment is liver transplantation and hepatectomy. Biliary atresia. It may be either due to viral infection or defective embryogenesis resulting in fibrosis of extra and intrahepatic biliary tree. Incidence is 1 in 10,000 population. Carcinoma gallbladder. Most common malignancy of biliary tract, most common female elderly. Treatment is limited to mucosa, simple cholecystectomy. If it is reaching muscle, extended cholecystectomy. Perimuscular connective tissue extended cholecystectomy with segment 4B and 5 resection. Extended right hepatectomy is done for tumor extending to liver. Cholangiocarcinoma, bile duct carcinoma. It is an aggressive adenocarcinoma which presents as obstructive jaundice. It commonly occurs at the hepatic duct confluence. Treatment is if operable tumor or inoperable cancer. Inoperable tumor, we do surgery. Extensive clearance needs chordate lobectomy and removal of common bile duct up to superior border of head and neck of pancreas, hilar, portal, common hepatic duct, posterior pancreatic nodes and celiac nodes removed. Portal being removed if involved. In inoperable cancer, we do brachytherapy, gemcitabine with 5-fluorouracil and metallic stents. Carcinoma pancreas and periampullary carcinoma. Pancreatic tumors. Exocrine adenocarcinoma, endocrine insulinoma, gastrinoma and glucagonoma. Periampullary carcinoma, tumor in region of ampulla which is located in 2 cm of radius of ampulla. Lower common bile duct, duodenum are totally called as periampullary carcinoma. Most common presentation is painless jaundice and most common site is the head of pancreas. Treatment is Whipple's procedure, radical pancreaticoduodenectomy used for cancer of the pancreas head only. Removal of pancreas head, duodenum, stomach, portion of jejunum and gallbladder. Postoperative care. Monitoring with prothrombin time, bilirubin, albumin, creatinine, electrolyte estimation, antibiotics. Observe for septicemia, hemorrhage, pneumonia, pleural effusion, bile leak. Care of T-tube and drains. T-tube cholangiography in 10 to 14 days. Total parenteral nutrition, central venous pressure, nasogastric tube, urinary catheter. Duration of post-operative care depends on treatment modality and differs from patient to patient. Thank you.
Hello. Now we would invite Dr. Rajat Bhargav for his expert comments. He is Associate Professor in the Department of Gastroenterology.
Good afternoon, respected seniors, teachers, my dear colleagues and dear students. First of all, I will congratulate Tarun Ojha sir and the team for such a good presentation. I was present in the last presentation on jaundice as well, where the anatomy, physiology and the basic aspects were dealt with. And this time a very good presentation by the Department of Medicine, Pediatrics, Surgery and Radiology. One thing I would like to say to the students that try to speak more and write less on the slides. It should be less of reading. You should not read the slide the way it is made. Try to write less and speak more. Coming to the jaundice, as a gastroenterologist, we see it very commonly, and we have all those patients which may have jaundice because of a prehepatic disease, a liver disease, or a posthepatic disease. So very important at the UG level is to identify that a yellowish discoloration and a bilirubin level of more than 2.5 is classified as jaundice. And once you have identified it, it is very important to make identification whether it's a medical jaundice or it's a kind of obstructive jaundice, because the treatment for the prehepatic and the hepatic condition is purely conservative and with various drugs. When it comes to the post-hepatic jaundice, whether it's the biliary atresia in children or any of the cause like CVD, stone, malignancies, they all need early identification and surgical management. As it has been told and shown in the slides, history and examination. So if we are able to do a good history, we take it from the patient with that, and with the examination like findings of nodular liver being palpable, palpable spleen. If a GB is palpable in any patient, think of malignancy. So these findings are very important, and with very simple and basic investigations like hemoglobin, liver function test, you can identify, you can classify most of these patients. So if you have anemia with unconjugated rise in bilirubin, think of a hemolytic disease, think of ineffective erythropoiesis. If you have a conjugated hyperbilirubinemia with increased OTTT, a normal alkaline phosphatase, think of a liver disease where you have to deal with the other important tests like albumin and the prothrombin time. And if you have some the test in the form of a raised alkaline phosphatase which is elevated more than 3 times upper limit of the normal, then think of an obstructive disease. So not in all patients, at a very simple level, you have to have this simple blood test, urine test, and you can classify. The first imaging that you should go for is an ultrasound, where if intrahepatic, we look for predominantly the dilatation of the intrahepatic biliary tree. If there is any dilatation of the bile duct inside the liver, it suggests an obstructive jaundice. That is managed either with the help of ERCP or the surgery. Once we diagnose it as intrahepatic or extrahepatic obstruction, then the imaging modalities that we have discussed in detail, the computed tomography, the MRCP, they all help us in deciding what is the cause of this obstruction, what is the level of obstruction, how to manage them. ERCP we routinely do in gastroenterology. It's a technique with the help of a scope. We work through the major papilla in the duodenum and we remove the stones, we place the stents. Endoscopic ultrasound is another important modality that has come up, which is having an ultrasound at the tip of an endoscope, and we are able to identify most of these lesions. As far as the treatment is concerned, again, after identification, proper diagnosis, we start for the treatment of hepatic jaundice, like if we have a patient with hepatitis B and hepatitis C, we have various oral drugs being available. And once the patient has developed an advanced liver failure, he or she may need a liver transplant. In obstructive jaundice, as it has been dealt in detail, it needs a medical treatment, mostly a surgical treatment, either open surgery or what we do is ERCP. So that's the point, and I think you should understand the basic things very well, because details of these procedures and the treatment you will read whenever you do a MD, MS, further DM, MCH, then you will be able to understand the details of these things. So thank you, and my colleague Dr. Vinay is doing a procedure now, so he is not available at present.
Thank you, Rajat, for sparing your valuable time. Now I would invite, we request Dr. Jeevan Saxena sir to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think it's been a wonderful presentation, and at the very onset, I would like to congratulate Pulkit, Ayushi, Bhavyanshi, and Vimla for the presentation that they gave. And the points that were mentioned by Dr. V.K. Kapoor have to be kept in mind. that the presentation has to be precise. Crisp is the word that we use. And as Dr. Rajat mentioned, the slides should not contain more than 16 to 18 words in the presentation. And that will go a long way in making your presentation memorable, and it forms an image of the kind, and what you want to say, you can say in more words. So that is as far as the presentation is concerned, and the wonderful job that all 4 students have done. In the management of jaundice, a lot of things have been talked about. One thing I would like to put in, as students of science, with the scientific temper, every day we get to see lots of patients of jaundice. And we know the division of pre, post, this, that, medical management, surgical management. But one thing that we have to compete with and to make sure that we spread the word is the use of pseudoscience in the management of jaundice. And what is pseudoscience? I'm sure all of you are aware. As soon as the word jaundice or pilia is mentioned in the family, there will be somebody coming up, iska jhada lagwa dete. I'm sure everybody must have come across that word. And as doctors, as scientists, it's our duty to not only prevent that from happening to a patient, because what happens is, there's this pseudoscience often results in delayed diagnosis and treatment, leading to complications. We are not going to oppose the customs of the society and things, but as students of science, it is our duty, especially in a topic like jaundice. I'm sure Dr. Rajat must have, the only competitor Dr. Rajat would have is the person who is doing the jhala and whatever is happening. So, as our part of our ethics, part of our training, part of our study, every student here should ensure that in his family and the group of people that he is with, he must oppose this pseudoscience tooth and nail. It is only with the development of scientific temper that we will avoid seeing complications that we see very often. All the doctors sitting here will have seen complications which have come up because of either the patient being brought late, and what is it? Why did they bring late? The diagnosis was made 2 months back. So hum to jhada lagwa rahe the, and by which time the problem has increased. It's true for jaundice, it is true for another word that we use, and that is typhoid. And invariably, the people in our society will go for typhoid. So iska typhoid dab gaya tha, humne wo kiya. We end up with more complications, nutritional deficiencies, and increased mortality because of delayed treatment. But because the topic this morning was jaundice, it's especially true, and I emphasize, repeat, please, as students of science, make it your duty to ensure that such a pseudoscience is not taken care of by the society. Thank you.
Rajat, I want your one slide before this. Please come. Two sessions, 2 days, and so many presentations you precisely put in one slide. That is called expertise. For you, I have only one question. Because as Dr. J.N. Saxena says, jaundice is very common, not usually or normally treated by allopathic doctors. And such treatment is not anywhere in India. This is by other system of medicine. I do not want to. As I said, the patient, they don't come. Or they come late. By the time. So this classification, medical or surgical, viral or not, we have to help the patient to come out of this. I have two major observations. I'll ask them this. Jaundice is a sign or symptom or a disease? No, please. I will look at this. I ask very simple question. Jaundice is a sign or a symptom or a disease? Where we are making? Where we means one of you please tell. Symptom. Symptom means what patient says. You said sign. That what the physician will say. Say once the yellow color urine, the patient comes to doctor. It may be a physiology cause or a pathology cause. Okay, how to do justification of commenting on this? If somebody, a qualified doctor or a resident, write on the case is jaundice, I will not accept it. For simple reason, it is a sign. Like you write fever, you write malaria, you write typhoid. Typhoid is not the diagnosis. If you write properly the enteric fever after diagnosis or something. I do not want to go into details. From next session onwards, if you take a topic, jaundice, you should know important is what WHO says on International Classification of Disease, ICD-10. You type and see right now what is jaundice. It's a disorder of bilirubin metabolism. They don't mention it is jaundice. So please note down. From next time onwards, for any topic, you should have the ICD code, number 1. Number 2, for example, obstructive jaundice, there is ICD code. Neonatal jaundice, there is an ICD code. So, we as an administrator, we always look into the final diagnosis at the time of discharge, what is the ICD coding. It is now we are doing manually at the medical record department. I am very sorry. None of the doctors, residents or students, even the budding level, we don't give importance to ICD code. So next class onwards, next presentation, you should start with what is in the bracket, the code number. Study the definition of what international classification of WHO says. Please take it as one advice. Thank you. And you look at this, one slide is more than enough to all covered in a very precise manner. Thank you very much. Yeah, question and answer. Anybody who wants to ask any questions, please.
Good afternoon. As provisions are also reflected upon the importance of distinguishing the physiological and pathological jaundice, the icterius neonatorum, which is developed in almost all the infants. So, what is the cause of the development of icterius neonatorum in infants?
In infants, there is decreased intestinal motility and more RBC lifespan, more RBC mass. In neonates, there is increased RBC mass, so there is increased hemolysis, and lifespan of RBC is short comparatively to adults. And hepatic system is immature, so conjugation of bilirubin is not proper, and increased enterohepatic circulation. Due to that, it is more commonly occur in neonates physiologically.